So fresh off a week of being yelled at by his constituents back home in Montana, Congressman Ryan Zinke is now asking Elon Musk and DOGE to take it easy. The Montana congressman saying we can all agree on removing fraud, waste, and abuse, but does it mean that you remove benefits from those that need it? The answer is no. Zinke knows that the Trump White House, better than about anybody else, that he served as Interior Secretary in Trump's first term and remains a strong supporter of the president in Congress. But recent moves from Elon Musk and DOGE are clearly raising concerns. Congressman Ryan Zinke joining me now from Capitol Hill. Congressman, good to see you. You know, after the past week, you've had these protests at your offices in Bozeman and Missoula over these DOGE cuts. What are you telling your constituents now? And I understand they are also calling for a town hall. Are you going to do it?
Well, first of all, let's put in context of Elon Musk. What they've done is something Congress could not do. We couldn't open up the bowels of the government to determine the amount of waste, fraud, and abuse. You have USAID, billions of dollars of grants going out on purposes that Americans simply reject. And, we can argue back and forth and we could debate, and we should, where we spend our dollars, but it should be transparent and it should be accountable. On the personnel side, to put it again in perspective, is that the first year of Biden hired far more people than have received a notice in the few weeks of the Trump campaign. My concern is this, people do matter. On the front lines of our forests, of our firefighting, on the parks, those people really matter and they do a good job. So when we look at personnel, you have to do it very carefully to make sure that, again, from a perspective of a naval officer, let's say on a nuclear submarine, you don't want to be flipping valves and switches unless you know what they do. So mass hirings or firings generally are not good, and it won't give you the outcome you want. But on the front line is where we need you more show up on forestry, not biologists. We don't need another series of climate warriors. What we need people to do is manage our resources wisely.
All right, so you seem to be saying to slow it down. So slow it down where?
Well, when I was Interior, I came across the grants, and I stopped the grants because it's unconscionable to spend money on areas we have no business doing. So waste, fraud, and abuse, but it does take time to sort through it and say, this is a good expenditure, this is a bad expenditure, and the scale of what happened in the 4 years was sufficient enough to say all stop. Now there are some circumstances like seasonals that they tried to get higher through the government system. It became so cumbersome that the Forest Service decided, we'll make everyone full-time and then just lay them off. So when you do an assessment at Washington, D.C. level, you decide that all these people are probationary. They were just hired. Well, they've been doing seasonal for a long time, and we're working our way through that. You see Doug Burgum and now relaxing some of the restrictions, especially on seasonal, on firefighting, on those critical functions that we all agree are critical. But that's not pay for things we don't need or outrageous.
Okay, you're talking about the land side of things, but look, 30% of the federal workforce are veterans as well. You're a former Navy SEAL. We've seen massive staffing and funding cuts at the VA. So how do you think these cuts are going to impact all of those who have served our country?
Well, are the cuts on the front line, or they're in bureaucracy? Are they needed or not needed? I think we can all agree that we're $26 trillion in debt. So let's make sure we're doing what we should do, helping the people that need help, and have work requirements for the people that can work. And our workforce does need to be looked at. I'm a SEAL, and you mentioned, the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense has 800,000 DOD employees. Those are non-uniform in DOD. What does that cost? Over $200 billion when you look at pension fund, salary, and health care. On scale, that's about 15 aircraft carriers a year in combat strength that is in bureaucracy. By the way, we can probably only field 5 aircraft carriers at the moment. That's the scale of the bureaucracy. I'm for looking at it. And lastly, there's 3 parts. There's one, identifying it. I think Elon Musk has done a magnificent job of exposing it. Now it has to be confirmed that there is fraud, waste, and abuse there, and then restructured in many cases that you provide the services that you're intended to without all the waste.
Okay, let me ask you about the fraud, the abuse, the waste. You know, during your time as Secretary of the Interior, you were investigated by your agency's Inspector General for misuse of funds. We should note the DOJ declined to prosecute you under both President Trump and President Biden. But now many of those IGs have been fired. Is that a good idea when the goal of DOGE is actually to eliminate fraud and corruption?
I was investigated on the horse I rode in on, my socks. It was harassment. Every investigation led to the same conclusion. No wrongdoing. There never was. With President Trump, let's see, Russian collusion. That was not possible in the campaign. Obstruction of justice with Ukraine. No, he was actually investigated after he was president down at Mar-a-Lago. So you look at the corruption in the DOJ, and there is corruption. And starting out with this clean slate of people that aren't biased, on IGs. And look, I had an IG that was absolutely biased. She was anti-Trumper, and as soon as I left, so did she. So you look at it, let's just do things fairly, look at it, and I am absolutely in support of removing IGs. And look, if you're in a government position and you willingly and knowingly commit fraud or taint the scales of justice in the case of an IG, which should be above that, I think there's problems, and there is problems internally, and we're fixing it.
All right, let's talk about problems internally, possibly. Yesterday's cabinet meeting, you've attended a few of those yourself. What was your reaction when you realized that Elon Musk was basically running the show here?
Well, I disagree with that. But remember, Joe Biden also ran a cabinet meeting, so let's start there. But with Trump, I can tell you, I've been to many cabinet meetings. It is unlike anything you've ever been attended. You know, he says what he wants to say. He says what's on the top of his mind, and people say, well, he meant this, he did this. A lot of Trump is just President Donald J. Trump. You love him, you like him, but he's going to position himself in this country where he can negotiate, and his cabinet meetings are far more open than other presidents that have been associated with as far as the dialogue inside the cabinet meetings. A lot of times there's a script, but he'll go off script, as you know, almost as soon as the meeting starts.
But do you think Elon Musk is the boss of the cabinet meeting? Because clearly there were cabinet secretaries that behind closed doors told Elon Musk they didn't like what he was doing, specifically that email to employees to, hey, name your 5 accomplishments you just made in the last week. But then when he was standing there with his tech support T-shirt, the elephant dressed in black in the room, nobody said anything. Nobody challenged him. Nobody challenged the president.
Well, let me be clear. There's 2 people that are elected in Washington, D.C., as far as the cabinet members. That would be the president and the vice president. The other ones are appointed and serve at the pleasure of the president. So who's in charge? Donald J. Trump, 47.
Congressman Ryan Zinke, appreciate your time today. We'll be right back.
Likewise.